MBA Research and Curriculum Center is proud to present this video series on ethical principles, brought to you by the Daniels Fund Ethics Initiative. You can find timestamps, links, and more in the video description box below. Subscribe to our channel to stay up to date with all of our content. This video will cover the fourth ethical principle of transparency. First, let's explore our ethics dictionary. Transparency is defined as the quality of being open, truthful, and just as one seems. It comes from the medieval Latin root word transparentum, which means easily seen through. Let's look at some words that are alike and different. First are synonyms, or words that are very close in meaning. Some synonyms of transparency are clarity, clearness, and pellucidity. Next are antonyms, or words that are opposite in meaning. Some antonyms of transparency are unclear, vague, questionable, and unintelligible. Tenzin Gyatso, the Tibetan 14th Dalai Lama, said, "A lack of transparency results in distrust and a deep sense of insecurity." Building blocks are the traits that a person needs to have in order to act ethically. Each ethical principle has its own set of traits. What building blocks are associated with this principle? Transparency's first building block is consistency. Consistency means providing reliable results or information. You might hear someone say, "My business is running like clockwork," meaning it is running smoothly and reliably. Let's look at an example. You work as a waitress in a restaurant. At the end of each week, you tell your supervisor how many dinner specials you have sold. An inconsistent person would not be concerned over whether their numbers are accurate each week. A consistent person would be honest every week, even when they've had a bad sales week. Transparency's second building block is accessibility. Accessibility means being easily reached or understood. You might hear someone say, "I keep my records close at hand," meaning they are able to quickly and easily look up information. Let's look at an example. You're on the yearbook club and are responsible for keeping track of pre-orders. A person who values accessibility would make sure that they have the correct data when speaking with other club members. How do the building blocks of transparency work together? Can you have one without the other? It's good to be accessible, but you need to remain consistent in order to be truly transparent. Let's look at an example. Jason is interviewing for a job that he really wants. The interview has gone well so far, and Jason has been able to answer all the interviewer's questions truthfully. Before the interview is over, however, they ask him if he knows how to use a special kind of software. Jason isn't familiar with that software, so he stays consistent with his answers and gives an honest response. Jason can elaborate further and make sure the right information is accessible for the interviewer. For example, Jason can say, "I can learn new software quickly," to prove that while he doesn't know that software, he has the ability to learn it on the job. When you combine accessibility with consistency, you'll become a person who is productive, reliable, trustworthy, and informative. In other words, you'll have transparency. We can learn more about the consequences of behaving without ethical principles from events in the past and present. The following story is just one example. Please note that there is a content warning for brief discussions of violence in this segment. Viewer discretion is advised. You may choose to skip ahead using the timestamps in the video description.
Saudi Arabia faces new calls tonight to tell all it knows about the death of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The demands from Turkey and Washington build on the crisis that is already engulfing the Saudi kingdom. Foreign Affairs correspondent Nick Schifrin begins our coverage.
In front of a packed parliament in Ankara, Turkey's president today provided the highest-level accusation that Saudi Arabia premeditated the killing of a critic.
The information and evidence that has been uncovered thus far lead to the conclusion that Jamal Khashoggi was the victim of a gruesome murder. Concealing such an atrocity would hurt the collective conscience of humanity.
Let's examine the timeline of events. On October 2, 2018, Jamal Khashoggi, a Saudi journalist and vocal critic of his home country, visited Turkey with his fiancée. Khashoggi entered the Saudi consulate in Istanbul to pick up marriage documents and was never seen again. The following day, the Saudi government confirms that Khashoggi is missing. They say that he was last seen while leaving the building, while Turkish officials believe that he never left the building. By October 10th, flight records of an alleged hit squad are leaked to the Turkish press. This hit squad included forensics, military, and intelligence personnel from Saudi Arabia. They arrived in Istanbul on the morning that Khashoggi went missing and left later that day. On October 19th, after audio of an attack on Khashoggi is recovered by Turkish officials, Saudi Arabia admits that Khashoggi was killed within the Saudi consulate. They claim that he died during a fistfight and was not murdered. This sparks a global condemnation of Saudi Arabia by world leaders. On October 22nd, CCTV footage is released to the public that shows a body double dressed in Khashoggi's clothes, walking around Istanbul after the murder took place. Between late 2018 and early 2019, several organizations, including the CIA, linked the Khashoggi murder to Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. These claims are denied by the Saudi government, who charge 11 people for the crime in a closed trial. The Saudi Arabian government tried to cover up the murder of Jamal Khashoggi by issuing inconsistent statements, and even tried to use a body double to hide their involvement in his disappearance. Once evidence had been gathered that proved they were involved, they issued statements that contradicted the evidence and held a closed trial that was inaccessible to the public and press. Why does this event illustrate the importance of transparency? Let's take a second look. A consistent government would stick to their story instead of trying to offer new explanations as a cover for what really happened. An accessible government would make the truth clear from the beginning and keep the public informed about the suspects and the trial. Why do ethical principles matter in your life? Let's take a look at an example. We've looked at a lot of scenarios where people acted with or without ethical principles. Now, you'll get to decide what to do in an ethical dilemma. Pay attention to the following scenario and think about how you would respond. In your senior year of high school, you take a class that requires a long, intensive personal project. You'll need to submit this project before the end of the school year in order to graduate, and you also need to give a presentation on the project to your class. You have a hard time coming up with a topic, and before you know it, you've fallen behind schedule. You realize that you'll need help from your teacher in order to finish on time. In the real world, there are many ways you could respond to this problem. However, in this hypothetical scenario, you have 4 choices available to you. 1, you put off asking for help until your teacher asks you how your project is going. 2, you don't ask for help, rush through the work, and do the bare minimum on your project and presentation. 3, you ask your teacher for help as soon as you realize you've fallen behind. Or 4, you plagiarize your project from online examples. Which choice would you make? Take some time to think about your answer. What choice did you decide to make? Let's explore some of the benefits and drawbacks of each choice. If you pick choice 1, you waited for your teacher to talk to you before admitting you needed help. This choice isn't ethical, but it's not the worst decision you could have made. Accessibility means that you share information readily. Otherwise, you are lying by omission. With this choice, you'd benefit from getting help from your teacher to complete your project and finish on time. Your finished project will be a higher quality than if you had rushed through the work on your own. However, your teacher might be upset that you waited to ask for help. You'd also need to put in a lot of work in order to catch up and finish your project, and you wouldn't have lots of time to prepare for your presentation. If you pick choice 2, you didn't ask for help. Instead, you rushed through the work and put in the bare minimum amount of effort into your project and presentation. This is an unethical choice. You should have demonstrated accessibility by admitting to your teacher that you needed help. You also showed inconsistency by putting in less effort than you are capable of. With this choice, you'd benefit from submitting your project on time. However, you'd still need to work hard to finish on time without your teacher's help. You'd also probably get a bad grade on your submitted project and presentation since you didn't put a lot of work into them. Finally, your teacher might ask you to resubmit parts of your work if they feel it's not up to your usual standards. If you pick choice 3, you spoke up early and asked your teacher for help. This is the ethical choice. You use the building blocks of consistency and accessibility to make the right decision. With this choice, you'd benefit from completing your project to the best of your ability. You'll be more prepared for your presentation and will probably get a higher grade than if you had waited to ask for help. However, you'd still have to put in the effort to get a good grade, and your teacher might check in with you frequently to make sure that you're still on track. If you pick choice 4, you plagiarized your project. This is the most unethical choice. You still failed to use consistency and accessibility, and you also stole another person's work and claimed it as your own. With this choice, you'd benefit from not having to work hard on your project. You'd still fulfill the project requirements and finish on time. However, you would not be prepared to present your plagiarized material. What if someone asks a question and you can't answer it? Also, plagiarism is against school rules and can have severe punishments. You'd risk getting punished, and if your school found out that you plagiarized the project, they might even change your graduation status. Which choice did you make? Hopefully, seeing the benefits and drawbacks associated with your choice made it easier for you to visualize how ethical principles can impact your future. When you take time to consider any potential benefits and drawbacks, you will be better prepared to make ethical decisions in real life. Wondering how you can become a more ethical person? Here are some things to consider going forward. How can you act with transparency in your own life? Take a look at these examples. At school, transparent people are good listeners and give constructive criticism. At home, transparent people are accountable for their behavior and tell the whole truth. While working or volunteering, transparent people are polite and never react defensively to negative feedback. It's important to take time for self-reflection. First, ask yourself, can you think of a time when others were not transparent with you? How about a time when someone demonstrated transparency? How did their behavior and actions differ? Second, consider your environment. What can you say and do to encourage others to be transparent? Thank you for watching. We hope that you enjoyed this deep dive into ethical principles. This video was presented by MBA Research and Curriculum Center on behalf of the Daniels Fund Ethics Initiative. To learn more, please visit mbaresearch.org or click the link in the video description box below.